Okay, here we go. So we're going to do a part 2, speaking about demons. And we're actually going to be speaking today about capturing the king of the demons. And essentially, as a disclaimer, just stay away. Stay away. That's the psak of the Ramah, that anybody who got involved in things, it doesn't usually go well. And even though there is such a thing, and the Torah talks about such things, it's not a good idea. According to some opinions, it's absolutely prohibited to be dealing with demons. Specifically, it would fall into the category of black magic, which is absolutely prohibited. Even the areas, like we're going to see, Mitzvah Shem today, where there was some example of it, was only using certain names of God, and only by King Solomon, or people that are very, very high-level people. And even there, it was only for a certain purpose. And even there, we're going to see King Solomon himself was damaged. And he was the one who we said yesterday ruled over everything, the Elyonim and the Tachtoinim, the upper worlds, lower worlds, including the demons. And even though he had rulership, he was still damaged. And therefore, my disclaimer is to everybody out there all over the world, stay away. Stay away. Yes, Binyamin.
First question, why would God make the demons?
Free will.
Yeah,
Just because God made heroin doesn't mean you should use it. Stay away from drugs.
No, we didn't make the demons though. Like the demons were designed by God.
Yes. God also made idol worship. God also made black magic. He made these things in order to give us free will. To not choose them. On the side of good is prophecy. On the side of bad is idol worship and black magic. Hardcore stuff. Okay, let's just go in. So the Gemara itself asks, Shida v'sheidesin lamai iboile. What was King Solomon involved with these demons? We said that King Solomon had absolute dominion over everything, not only silver and gold and everything. Even he had dominion over the demons. So the Gemara says, Dirsi ve'habais bihi banoisai even shlema masa nivna. A verse from Kings, that there is a law that in the building of the Mizbech, in the building of the Beis HaMikdash, you're not allowed to use metal to carve out the stones of the Holy Temple. Rather, the stones that are taken from the quarry have to be used exactly as they are and cannot be manipulated by metal. Well, how do you take stones, huge boulders from a quarry, and make a structure out of them? How do you build a Beis HaMikdash out of these jagged stones that are not fitting properly? And you can't use metal. So how are you going to shave down the stones to build a proper structure, a Beis HaMikdash? So Amar Lahu l'Rabbanan. So King Solomon said to the rabbis, Heichi Avid, how am I going to build the Beis HaMikdash? King Solomon built the Beis HaMikdash, but how am I going to do it? The verse teaches me I cannot use metal to carve and shape the stones to the size necessary. So Amrulay, you may have heard of this before. So the sages told King Solomon, they said, Ika Shmira. There is something called the Shamir worm. That's right. The laser worm, if you will. Not quite a laser, but a worm, or a sheretz, a type of insect or worm from the sea that had these powers that any hard surface that it came in contact with, it was able to bore through it and essentially carve out and cut the stones without using any metal. So there is such a worm, they said. The only way for you to build the Beis HaMikdash is you need to find this worm. But it's extremely rare, and you have to gain access to the Shamir worm. And you should know, the Aisi Moshe la'avne ephod. And Moshe Rabbeinu, when he was making, you remember the Kohen Gadol's breastplate? The 12 gemstones on the breastplate of the Kohen Gadol? So how were those carved out? So the answer is they used this same Shamir worm. Now, where did Moshe Rabbeinu, there's a lot of parts of the story, this would take us really like 9 or 10 hours to go into the depths of what's happening, and I would just begin what's going on here. We're going to pack this into 20 minutes or so. Where were the Shamir worms initially found? In the ocean, and they were also accessed, they must have been in the desert, because the Jews were in the desert, and that's where Moshe Rabbeinu was building the Mishkan. Remember, who else comes from the desert or deserted places where there's no population?
Demons.
Oh, we said the demons. So it's important to take note. Also, what else? There's a few things that were created also Bein Hashmashos. Bein Hashmashos means in the creation of the world, there was a few things that was created right at the end of the 6 days of creation, right before going into that first Shabbos. One of them were the demons. Another one was this Shamir. So there's a connection between this Shamir creature and the demons. Both that Moshe Rabbeinu used the Shamir in the desert, and the demons are there. And also that they're both created at the same time. So, what did King Solomon say? Amar lahu, Heichen ishtakach. Where am I going to find the Shamir? I acknowledge this is the right thing if I need to build the Beis HaMikdash, but how am I going to find it? So, Amruleh. So the rabbis told King Solomon, I see Shida v'Shedasin, go find a male and a female demon. You already see here there's a certain usage. Now, by the way, what do you notice right away? He wasn't like just hanging out thinking like, what do you want to do today? Call up the demons? No. I'm going to say this probably 5,000 times, and if I don't, I should. At least. Don't play games with demons. I'm warning you. Don't play games. People get hurt from this stuff.
How do you find them?
It's all going to come clear in the Gemara. So they said, so don't get involved. Don't get involved. Stay away. Here, King Solomon, because he anyways had rulership over all the upper worlds and the lower worlds, means he had a certain power. And two, he was only doing it for Beis HaMikdash. I said, I want to get the demons to help me, make some money to give tzedakah. No, don't play games. Stay away. Kavshinu adodi. So go bring a male and a female and put a certain amount of pressure on them, meaning exert your dominance over them. You are King Solomon. Efshar diyadi umegalilach. And the rabbi said it's possible they will know where the Shamir is and they will reveal it to you. Now, why did the rabbis have that thought to begin with? Like we mentioned, there's already a connection because the Shamir was in the desert, and that's where the demons are. And the Shamir was created at the same time, Bein Hashmashos, as the demons. So there was a thought, maybe they're shaykh to the Shamir. Maybe they would know. So what happened? So I see Shida v'Shedsin kavshinu adodi. And King Solomon brought them, and in fact put a certain amount of pressure to ascertain where the location of the Shamir was. So Amri, so the demon said back to King Solomon, Ana lo yadinan, we do not know the spot of the Shamir. However though, Dilma, perhaps, Ashmedai. You might have heard this name before. Ashmedai Malka de Shede Yoda. Perhaps Ashmedai, who's the king of the demons, perhaps he will know. Now, The Mefarshim explained that Ashmedai was not the name of the king of the demons. Ashmedai is like Pharaoh. It's the name for whoever the king is. Now, what do you mean, whoever the king is? Remember, we explained that demons have certain human qualities and that they eat and they drink and they procreate and they die. Not in the same way as you might understand. They don't eat physical food, but they eat, i.e. they take nourishment spiritually. That makes sense? An angel doesn't need to take spiritual nourishment, but a demon does. They'll, so to speak, draw life force from people, like a parasitic relationship. There's a certain, they're eating from that person. They're not sitting down and having a burgers bar, you understand? Okay? So they said maybe the king will know. Amalahu. So Shlomo said, Heichi Isa, where can I find him? So now you see the demons are going to reveal to King Solomon where the king is. Amrilei. They told King Solomon, remember, Shlomo HaMelech had dominance over all the upper worlds and the lower worlds. So he was able to bring the demons to him and ascertain information and tell me where the head honcho is. Where's Ashmedai? So they said, Isa Betura Palan. Ashmedai, this stuff you're going to be like, now I know where Lord of the Rings got all the material from. Ashmedai, Isa Betura Palan, there's a certain mountain, a certain hideaway, deep in a deserted place, and Ashmedai is there. And in that place, in that very mountain, Kara le Beira, Umalia le Maya, Mekasya betinara, Vechasme begushpanke. In that place, in that mountain region, in that particular mountain, Ashmedai has a giant hole that he dug. Inside the hole he has water, in that hole. And then he covers the water with a certain stone. And then on that cover he puts a seal. He's chaysim it. On the cover he just like a king puts wax and then seals it so nobody will open up the letter signed by the king. Ashmedai also has this seal that the cover of his giant waters well is not tampered with. Now, why would you think that's a problem? That it shouldn't be that his water is tampered with? But remember, if the demons have human-like qualities, so one answer is that he was concerned that people would come to poison it, and that would affect him. There's also a concern that there's something called mayim megulim. Do you know that in Jewish law, do we leave our liquids uncovered?
No.
Why not?
Demons go inside it.
So the Gemara says that it used to be in the olden days that there were snakes, and a snake might go in and put venom inside the liquid. So nowadays we're not so worried about that. So why do we still cover it? So still we're worried about something more spiritual, a certain impurity going into our liquids. It could even be also, there were people that were putting out publications all over Yerushalayim and all over the world about certain insects laying tiny larvae that were turned into tons of bugs. They were cautioning people that you should cover your food, cover liquids, because if they just insert some of that larvae, it turns into bug city. Whatever reason though, the idea of keeping something covered, specifically when it comes to damaging forces, is related to liquids. Okay? So now the demons were telling this to King Solomon. They're sort of revealing, which is interesting, like the plan. Usually if you worked for the king, these were traitors, these demons. They're like revealing the hideout of the king. And now they're disclosing even more information. The kol yoyim asalik l'rakia. Interesting. Look at the head of the demons. every single day, Ashmedai goes up to the Rakia, which means into some level of Shemayim, into heaven. The Gamar Mesiv to the Rakia, and he learns Torah. Which is interesting because you wouldn't have thought that the demon wants to be that learned. He goes and learns Torah. V'nochis la'ara, and he comes back down to the earth. V'gomer mesiv to da'ara, and then he learns in a yeshiva down here. So Ashmedai is a very learned person. He's very powerful. He's not a person, he's a demon. But he shares certain qualities that he can go up there, he can come back down here. There's a certain eating he's doing, drinking. Va'asi sayr le'lagu shpanke, and what he does, every day that he comes back down, he checks on his water, his sustenance, if you will, to make sure that the seal is still there, that nobody broke the seal, to make sure that nobody's trying to poison him. As long as he sees that it's all still sealed up, he'll open up, drink, and reseal everything to make sure nobody tampers with his sustenance. Megalalei v'shasi mechasalei v'chasam leva'azam. And then he goes on his way. So now the question is, so they know the location, but how are they going to get him? We're going to introduce somebody new to the story now. King Solomon had a very, very powerful person that was in his cabinet. His name was, anybody know? Benayahu ben Yehoyada. Benayahu ben Yehoyada was the head of the high court. He was also the general of King David's army. He was considered a very, very powerful person. A very righteous and powerful person. And we're going to see that he was charged with going to that mountain to trap Ashmedai. Simple stuff, right? Like, regular, like a regular day.
It's a layup.
Now you see, layup, with the right hand, not even a left-handed layup. Basic stuff. So now you see what the big rabbis are up to. Like, just go trap for me the head of the demons and find out where I could get the Shamir for Beis HaMikdash, obviously. Okay, now here's where the excitement is about to start. Now it's important to take note. So Shadrei leBenayahu ben Yehoyada, so he sent Benayahu. Yoivlei, but before he left, King Solomon gave him a few pieces of protection and a few items he would need along the journey. Anybody have an idea what he gave him? You're about to go try to capture the head of the demons. What do you think you would need?
Maybe a sword.
So things like that. You need certain things. You need more than a few chocolate chip cookies for the trip. Right? So pay attention to what he gave him. Yahivlei shushilta dechakik Allah shein. He gave him this chain. And on the chain, though, it was carved into it one of God's names. Okay, we're entering a realm here that I need you to remove physical associations. We're entering to the world of analogy and concept. So I want you to start thinking less physical and more conceptual. He gave him a chain, i.e. some way of capture, and carved into this thing that allows you to capture dark forces and subjugate them is the name of God. And he also gave him Iskaso de Chakikal Hashem, and he gave him a ring that also had the name of God engraved into the ring. From King Solomon. Ugivove de Amra, and he gave him a large amount of wool shearings. Vizike de Chamra, and pouches or skins of wine. Okay? It's So we could piece together the story. Now, one of the things that are mentioned that Binayo, Ben Yoyoda, what's the last two letters? The Marsha points out, Binayohu is Vav and a Hey, right? A Vav and a Hey is the last two letters of Hashem's name. What's Yehoyoda? The first two letters? A Yud and a Hey. So he said, I'm hinting that inside your name is God's name, and I'm putting God's name into these two, the chain and the ring. It does not say that God's name was on the wool or the wine, but it was on the chain and on the ring. Ozil, and he went. Kara ber mitatoi. So look at his strategy of Binayo. By the way, the Mefarshim point out, why was his name called Binayo? Binayo also has the name Binyan, to build, because he's going to be given a connection to the building of the Beis HaMikdash, because we're going to see he's going to be successful and actually trap the king of the demons, Ashmedai, and because of that, access the Shamir. But before that actually happens, there's a lot of espionage and intrigue about to come. So Ozil Kara Beir Metatoi. So look what he did. He came to the mountain, he saw where this water source was, and he dug below where the water source was a giant reservoir. While Ashmedai was up learning Torah and Shemai. Now, you might think that's pretty miraculous. Like, how do you break through that much stone? How do you do it by yourself? This was the power of the ring. The ring that had Hashem's name on it gave him certain supernatural powers. And we're not talking about, like, you're thinking of, like, I don't know, thinking of like something from X-Men or something, like the guys, like, when I was growing up, who was the guy, like, Green Lantern had a ring, I think? Yeah. And, like, yeah? They all have rings, don't they? And like he would shine the ring and like do stuff. So there's not physical stuff here. We're talking about using spiritual concepts to help manipulate nature. Manipulating the physical world using names of God. And that gave him certain powers. Like the famous question of the Orach Chaim. Anybody learn the Gemara? Is there miracles all over the place? All over the place. Splitting the sea, resurrecting the dead. Why don't we have a Yom Tov for all the amazing miracles that you find in the Gemara? When we split the sea to come into the whole, to go through the Yam Suf, we make a Yom Tov. We have Shvi Shel Pesach. When Joshua splits the Jordan to come into the land of Israel, you don't even realize that it happened. Oh, like that for the Tammuz, like, oh, someone has to mention, like, oh, by the way, like today Joshua split the sea. Why don't you make more mention of it? Says the Orach Chaim HaKadosh. Because before the Torah was given, to change the natural world was a major thing. To manipulate the natural world was very, like, miraculous. But after the Torah was given, after God gave us the Torah at Har Sinai, at Mount Sinai, which is the Torah is all the names of God, of course you could use the Torah and nature will bend around you. That's like, oh yes, you don't need to make a Yom Tov, a holiday every single time that happens. That's like straightforward. That's going to happen. So this is the kind of things we're talking about, is the ring of Binayahu that was given by Solomon had this power. So he starts digging this giant reservoir underneath where Ashmedai's reservoir of water was. Why didn't he just go into the reservoir of Ashmedai? He would get caught, right? There was a seal there. And what did he do? V'shafin l'maya. And he emptied out, he dug this reservoir below, made a little tunnel up to the reservoir of Ashmedai, and started emptying out all the water. Then what he did, he took all of the wool that he had, he stooped up, he plugged up the hole, and then he went above. The Gemara goes through all these steps. He went above to a higher location, This is very miraculous for one day. It's from the ring. He went above the location of Ashmedai's reservoir. He dug another reservoir. And what do you think he inserted into that reservoir? Wine. All the wine that he had. The wine then went into which was once a full reservoir, now an empty reservoir, still though being covered by the seal of Ashmedai. So now Ashmedai doesn't realize it, but he has wine in his giant reservoir. Why did he put the wool? So that the wine wouldn't empty out into the bottom one. As a cork, very good. Then he covers over. He puts all the earth back in the top reservoir, which has nothing in it. The bottom reservoir, which had water, which he was able to just put all the earth back in. The water just squishes out and goes away. And now Ashmedai doesn't realize, but in his reservoir is filled with wine. So far, so good. Solik Yosef be'ilona, and Benayahu goes up to the top of a tree to hide and wait for Ashmedai to come down from learning to see what's going to happen. I told you this would take a long time. We're going to have another part, maybe 3, 4, 5, 6 in this, bli neder. We haven't even got to when he captures him and what happens. And then they bring Ashmedai back to King Solomon, and it's very, very profound things that happen. I will tell you the end of the story, though, is Ashmedai is very dangerous, and the Gemara is very, very concerned to stay away. Stay away at all costs, And therefore, the main takeaway, we don't have time to go into the details now, you can learn the Gemara, and all the details are here. To stay away. Anything which is into life, mitzvahs, Torah, run towards. Anything which is like going in like spooky directions, the Torah is cautioning you, stay away from these things. There's always going to be this one person, but I want to like be this like superhero character, like, you're not King Solomon. And even King Solomon was damaged by this. The demon essentially did some crazy things to King Solomon and took over his throne and pretended that he was Solomon and did very, very nasty things on the throne of Solomon until the rabbis realized that this was not Solomon sitting on the throne, even though he took on a human form and made himself look like it. One of the ways they found out is he was always covering his feet, because demons have these like chicken type feet. So he was always wearing like these funny socks. So people started to realize stuff was going on. The main takeaway, choose life. Daven, learn Torah, come to Yeshiva. The nightclubs and the bars, and these are like usually darker places. Be careful. The boogeyman comes out at night. Be careful be around good vibes. Say no to drugs. Go to places where people are really into life and into making things good in this world and the world to come. A person wants to get involved in these things. The Ramah says, a person is shomer nafshay, you really care about your soul, stay away from this stuff. You're going to mess up things in this world and the world to come. What's it worth? It's not worth it. Go on the straight path. It's called the Derech HaMelech. Go on the way of the king. Shachris, Mincha, Ma'ariv, a nice family, Shabbos Kodesh. Bring beauty and fulfilling things into your life. We should be Zoicha Mamish, this Tisha B'Av, to be with Mashiach Tzidkeinu, and to see the binyan of the Beis HaMikdash, B'mihira v'yameinu, Amen v'Amen. And Bezrat Hashem, King Solomon himself is going to get up out of the ground and escort in these great, great days ahead. Bezrat Hashem B'Karov.
Which is a Gemara.
The Gemara in